Welcome back to another native plant garden tour. This will be from September probably into early October, and we're going to be featuring some of the late season, early fall blooming plants. And this first one is Smooth Blue Aster. And this is really going off right now. The bees are enjoying it. I've noticed this has been spreading just a little bit, but not aggressively, so it's a pretty good pick for gardens. I know a lot of asters can spread, but this one is pretty well behaved and it has some really great color to it. And then over here, I have blue sage is blooming here. And this is the first year I've ever seen this blooming in person. This was grown by seed, so it's taken a couple years, but it's just a really great color. It's pretty unique in the garden, so if you're looking for a blue color, blue sage is aptly named and would be a great pick. I mean, that's just amazing looking. This is tall ironweed. I just planted this from bare root this spring, so obviously it's not nearly as tall as it will end up being, but I'm still very excited that it's already blooming and has been popular with the bees and insects. This should end up being taller than the common ironweed that we looked at in the last video, but really cool plant. And it's got the undersides of the leaves, I noticed, are very soft. It's a really interesting texture. So I'm looking forward to seeing this grow taller in future years. I wanted to quickly highlight my cosmos. Now these are a introduced wildflower that's more native to Mexico, but I still think that it's a great addition to your garden, especially when you're trying to establish your perennials. These are annuals and give you that early pop of color in that first season, and they do reseed, but they're pretty easy to identify and pluck if you didn't want them anymore. And these are really popular with insects and with the goldfinches when the seeds start to form. And there's a variety of colors. The standard cosmos are pink, white, and maroony colors, while the sulfur cosmos can be yellow or orange. So while they're not strictly native wildflowers, I still think that they have a spot in gardens when you're trying to get everything established. It's really nice and showy, and certainly is a head turner. This is Great Blue Lobelia, and this is in the same family as the cardinal flower, and instead of that vibrant red color, these are a bluish purple hue, which is really attractive to pollinators and even hummingbirds. This plant enjoys keeping its feet wet, so in a low area that gets a lot of moisture would be a good pick for this plant. And most sources say that this is a short-lived perennial, so it'll last a few years and then the mother plant will fade out, so it's a good idea to let this seed itself around a little bit. And another great thing about this family of plants is that it is deer and rabbit resistant, so that's pretty great. I've never had a problem with critters nibbling away at the plant when it pops up in the spring, so definitely another positive for this very cool plant. I have it growing next to the irises that we looked at earlier in the year, so that's a great companion plant. Both like it on the wet side, and you have blooms at different parts of the year. So I have a little patch there, and then another patch right over there next to it, and it's definitely buzzing in the early afternoon. This is sneezeweed, and despite that name, this doesn't cause any stress for allergy sufferers. This is a really cheerful yellow bloom that is popular with the bees, as you can see. This is another plant that enjoys wet areas, and my sneezeweed is actually, some of it's over 5 feet tall, so quite a bit taller than most sources say. So it really just goes to show if a plant is really happy where it's at, it's probably going to get at least the full size, if not a little bit bigger than most sources show. So definitely a great later season pop of color. It's a pretty interesting looking plant because it has these like webbing fins on the stems, which I think is pretty unique. So it's a really great identifying feature for sneezeweed. But a very, very nice bloom, and definitely worth adding if you have another wet area and don't mind getting a little bit on the taller side. I have this growing next to, in the back you can see the remnants of the obedient plant and some of the prairie blazing star. So I kind of have a rain garden going here. So very nice. This is turtle head, and it gets its name because the blooms kind of resemble a turtle poking through a shell. And this was planted just this spring as a bare root, so pretty excited to see it blooming already. It will end up getting quite a bit taller than it is now. It's only about a foot tall now, but a lot of sources say that it can get up to 5 feet. So a lot of room to grow in the future. But this type of bloom is one that attracts hummingbirds, and bumblebees like to get in there as well. So definitely a really nice white bloom for late season interest. This is another plant that prefers more moist soils. So if you have a spot that gets mostly full sun and can stay reasonably moist, then this is definitely a great pick and a fairly unique flower for the garden. This is swamp marigold, and this is kind of unique because this is one of the few annual flowers that I have that are native, and that basically means that it's going to grow and flower from seed in the first year and set seed, and then this plant will be done. So if you want this in your garden, you kind of have to make sure that it's able to reseed itself and continue year to year. And this is all just one plant over here. I did put these seeds out in the fall and just kind of let them pop up where they were happy. And as the name suggests, swamp marigold, this does prefer wetter soils. But this has actually been pretty nice to kind of see where it pops up. I have it growing next to some nice Joe Pye weed there, so they're neighbors here. But definitely a nice late blooming annual flower for the garden. So if you try to grow this, you will get blooms the first year. And unlike a lot of other similar plants in this family, the seeds don't have any barbs on them, so they shouldn't really stick to clothing like some other ones will. So another interesting fact about this plant. This is mountain mint, and you can see it has these little white flowers that are attractive to wasps and other pollinators. It has a very nice scent on the leaves. You can definitely tell it's in the mint family. And this one will spread by root and by seed, so it's definitely something to keep an eye out for, but it's definitely a different texture, and since it has that really nice smell, it's something that's fun to have in the garden, I think. So definitely one to consider. This is Old Field Goldenrod, and this is a late blooming plant that produces these really wonderful yellow flowers that is super great for the pollinators. You can see them all having a feast. Now this particular goldenrod is a little bit shorter in stature than another goldenrod. We're going to look at it a little bit. And this one prefers more of a dry soil condition. I have this growing in a few spots in my yard and areas where it was a little difficult to get different things to grow. So it's definitely a good plant if you have a dry, sunny spot that a lot of stuff won't grow. This was grown from seed, and I think this is a third-year plant now. So pretty great late season flower here. This unusual looking plant is called spotted bee balm, and this was actually grown from seed this year. So pretty crazy to already be getting these very kind of alien looking blooms. And it does have a strong aroma if you rub the leaves with your fingers. I think it's pretty nice, and because of that, it is resistant to bunnies and deer. In fact, I actually have it next to a Tennessee coneflower that needs a little extra. Even with invisible fence, it was still getting eaten. So this is definitely a great plant for those type of areas where you may have deer or rabbits. And this particular plant does like it on the drier side. And there's a few stalks putting up blooms right now. And this really only will get a couple feet tall, so it's great for the front of your perennial flower border. I wanted to call out the New England aster one more time. This particular plant was grown by seed that was sown in a winter jug, and it is blooming its first year, and it is notable to me because this is blooming significantly later than the New England aster that I planted as a bare root, which bloomed over a month ago. So it just goes to show you that if you start it early and the plant is happy where you put it, you definitely could get blooms the first year. And it's funny because this particular one actually got nipped by bunnies early on, so it was kind of like a Chelsea chop that was done for me, and it branched out and got this little cluster of beautiful purple flowers that really adds to the garden where, you know, almost everything is done for the season. So definitely a super great plant, and if you Chelsea chop it, I think an established plant that will also delay the blooming a bit, so that's can be a great idea to spread out the color in your garden. This is showy goldenrod, and it is in full bloom right now, and that basically means that the season is coming to a close. It's one of the later blooming goldenrods typically, and you can see that it's very attractive to the bumblebees and other pollinators. It's just got tons of blooms on every stalk. So a really nice bright yellow late season interest. And at this point there's really nothing in the yard that is left to bloom. So I hope everyone enjoyed this garden tour and had fun looking at some different native plants. So it'll be a while before the spring plants start popping up again. So I hope everyone enjoys the downtime. If you are busy gardening throughout the year, this is a time to take it easy and recover from working out in the yard. So until the next one, happy gardening.